Hey, if you're at the stage in your life where you've got maybe 10 to 15 years left before you'd like to be work optional or retired, this video will do two things. First, it's going to turn your situation into a number you can't ignore. Second, it's going to give you a plan that survives real life, and that's through to stabilize, protect, and rebuild. By the end, you're going to know exactly what to do in the next 90 days so one bad year does not become a retirement delay. I'm going to start with the story. Mike is 52. He's sitting in his car in his parking lot. Not because he's broke. Not because he's failing. No, but because it's the first minute he's had to himself all week. And he opens up the app and looks at his retirement account. And he does the one thing that most people avoid, like a medical test. He runs the numbers. And what the math tells him is that he's not just a little behind. He's been using a 30-year strategy inside a 10-year window. And that's the moment that people split into two types. The first, they freeze, they avoid, they distract themselves, and they'll say, I'll just deal with this later. Others, they panic. They start hunting for some miracle return because the math feels humiliating. Look, I'm not here to shame you, and I'm not here to sell you a dream. I'm here to level with you. So if you're 40, 45, 50, 65, whatever, and you've got maybe 10 to 15 years left before you want work to be optional, just invest more is not a plan. It's a coping mechanism. Quick context. I know some of you have way more life reps than me. Respect. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I lived your exact story. Here's what I can tell you. Me and my wife have one goal, and that's to be work optional in less than 10 years. Not because we think we're special, because we want our lives to be ours. We want time. We want flexibility. We've got one on the way. And I don't want to be the person who's too busy for the people that I supposedly work so hard for. So we did what everybody else does. We read the books. We watched the YouTube videos. We took notes. We ran the math. We ran it again. And we even argued with it. We even argued with each other. We changed the assumptions. We talked to professionals. We banged our head against the wall trying to figure out how this actually works in the real world. And what we learned is simple. A lot of traditional advice sounds responsible, but it quietly assumes you have 30 years and a smooth life. If you don't have that runway of 30, 40 years, or you don't want to bet your future on, I really hope that averages really work out in my favor, you need a different plan. Not hype, not miracles. So in short, I'm not here as the guy who knows it all. Here's the guy who got tired of vague advice, did the math, stress tested, and built a framework that doesn't collapse the first time life decides to act like life. And if your goal is some version of that, work optional sooner, more freedom, less anxiety, you're in the right place. Now, before we touch numbers, we have to clean up one word, because if we don't, you'll spend this whole episode arguing with a fantasy. Retirement. Most people hear retirement and they picture a cartoon. Hey, I'm going to stop working and sit at home and do absolutely nothing. And honestly, that's not even what most people even want. So in this video, retirement means work optional. You can still work, but you just don't have to. Work optional has tiers because not everybody wants the same outcome. So tier 1 is baseline. Your needs are covered without a job. Tier 2 is comfortable. Needs plus margin plus some wants. Tier 3 is resilience. Shocks don't break you, and you're not forced to depend on your kids. Here's a simple question you should answer before you do anything else. Which tier are you aiming for? Because if you don't pick a tier, your brain fills the gap with anxiety, and hey, that's normal, but it's fixable. So let's kill the isolation. A lot of people are in the same exact spot because life happened. Divorce, layoffs, health, taking care of parents, kids, inflation, debt, bad timing. The list goes on. And if you're sitting there thinking, how the hell did I even end up here? You're not some rare failure. But here's the part that you don't get to escape. The math doesn't care why. Shame makes people avoid the math. Avoidance makes people passive. And passive doesn't work when time is short. So we're going to stop guessing. If you're a late starter, you've got two enemies. One, time risk. You don't have decades for compounding to do the heavy lifting. And two, shock risk. You can't afford resets. Let me ask you something blunt. If your income got hit for 90 days, what breaks first? Rent, groceries, insurance, credit cards. Late starters don't lose because they chose the wrong fund or the wrong ETF. They lose because of one life event forces liquidation, borrowing, and restarting. And while you're restarting, the clock keeps running. And then there's a third thing most people ignore: the target moves. Moving target number one: inflation. Prices rise while you're trying to catch up. You don't have to predict inflation perfectly. You just have to stop pretending that today's costs are frozen. Here's the simple inflation math. You need $4,000 a month to live today, and inflation averages 3%. In 10 years, you don't need $4,000. You actually need roughly $5,400. In 15 years, you don't need $4,000. You need $6,200 roughly. And when someone says, hey, I need $4,000 a month in retirement, what they really mean is, I need $4,000 a month today. But you don't retire today, you retire into higher prices. And if that feels unfair, I agree, but that's the game. Now let's talk about the second moving target, because this turns I'm a little behind into, damn, I'm trapped. Moving target number two: longevity. Most people mentally picture retirement as what? 5 to 7 years? Like it's a short victory lap? That's a mental picture that's outdated. With better healthcare and longer lifespan, a lot of people will spend closer to 2 decades, sometimes more, living in that work optional phase. And that matters because a plan that barely survives 7 years can completely fall apart over 20. So here's the squeeze that late starters feel: short runway to build, but potentially a long runway to fund. So if you're thinking, okay, damn, that's heavy. Yeah, but it's also clarifying, because now you understand why the anxiety feels like a cloud, because you have a short runway and a moving target. Now, can we be blunt? Doing nothing is not neutral. It's not waiting. It's not being cautious. It's a decision, and it has consequences. First order consequences over the first 1 to 3 years. You stay cash tight. You keep using debt for surprises. And you keep telling yourself next year, next year, next year, and your gap extends quietly. Second order consequences over the next 3 to 8 years. You delay work optional by force, not choice. And you become vulnerable to downturns. You start making emotional catch-up decisions. Third order consequence over the long run. You don't just work longer. You become dependent on the family system. Adult kids become the backstop. Grandkids start to inherit the obligation instead of the options. And if that line bothers you, good. It means that you still care. Now, the question is, what do we do? Here's a plan that survives real life. Stabilize, protect, and then rebuild. And I need you to hear this because it saves people. Most late starters fail because they tried to start it at the end. They chase the upside while their foundation is fragile. You are not allowed to chase returns until your plan survives shocks. I'm gonna go deeper than a typical tips video for one reason. If you're late, vague advice costs you years. And you don't need motivation, you need mechanics. So here's what we're gonna do in order. We'll build your target the right way. We'll turn your gap into a real number. And we'll show how each lever changes the math. Then we'll apply stabilize, protect, and then rebuild into a real life shock scenario. So you can see why sequence matters. So you wanna build a target like an adult. Step one is to pick the tier. If you're late and behind, here's a relief you probably need. Start with tier 1, your baseline. Not because you don't deserve comfort, but because baseline is the first milestone that helps you gain breathing room. Baseline means if your job disappears, you can still cover needs. Needs are boring. That's why people avoid them. Housing, food, utilities, insurance, transportation, basic healthcare, basic life. Now ask yourself, do I know my baseline monthly number, or do I just have a feeling? If you don't know the number, you're not planning, you're hoping. Step 2. Adjust for inflation. You're not planning in today dollars, you're planning in future dollars. Step 3, acknowledge and realize you might need to fund this longer than you think. Not because you want some depressing life, but because you want a durable plan. You're not looking for certainty, you're looking for structure, and structure beats anxiety. So here's where we turn the gap into a number. Now we quantify the gap. You have your baseline monthly cost in future dollars, your expected reliable income later, and the difference there is your gap. So let me just run an example and stress test it. So your baseline today, let's say, is $4,000 a month. 15 years out at about 3% inflation, you're about $6,200 a month. Now add reliable income later. This is where people get emotional. Don't. Just be honest. Let's say reliable income later is $3,500 a month. So your gap is $6,200 a month of future dollars minus $3,500 of reliable income at that threshold. Your gap is $2,700 a month. That's $32,400 a year. And this is where Mike's face changed because he realized he wasn't just a little behind. He was staring at a gap that required a real plan. Here's the emotional pivot. When you can name the problem, you can stop being haunted. Now I'm going to do one more step with you because this is where the brain stops negotiating with you. We just calculated the gap. In the example, it was about $2,700 a month, so about $32,400 a year. Here's the question that most people avoid. What size of money do I need to be able to reliably cover that gap on a month-to-month basis? I'm not here to give you a promise. I'm giving you an order of magnitude because if you don't know the order of magnitude, well, you'll keep treating this like a, hey, I'll save a little bit more problem. So let's do the simplest version. There's a concept in traditional retirement planning called a withdrawal rate. Basically, what percentage can you pull from your portfolio each year without it running out too fast? And it depends on markets, inflation, taxes, how long you live. So we're not going to pick one number like it's gospel. We're going to do it in a range so your brain can see it. So if your annual gap is $32,400, at 4%, the pile of money you would need is about roughly $810,000. At 3%, the number is, you're looking at about $1 million, let's call it 1.1 million. And at 5%, about $648,000. So even in a normal example, you're looking at anywhere between $650K to 1.1 million. If that number made your chest go tight, good. It means that you're finally seeing the reality. Now we get to do something about it. So to cover that gap in a durable way, before we even argue about taxes, healthcare surprises, or even market timing, this is the moment I want you to be honest with yourself. If you're sitting at say 50 to 100K, that gap is not going to close with, hey, you know what? I'll just contribute a little bit more. I'll just save a little bit more. No. And that's the reason why late starters feel the pressure. The gap isn't emotional, it's mathematical. Now, don't spiral. This is not me telling me you're doomed. It's me telling you why sequence and levers matter. Because the only way to close that kind of gap is some sort of combination of these four things. Shrinking the target, adding runway, increasing surplus, carefully using higher upside tools in a way that doesn't blow you up. Now, less stress has inflation because if the target moves faster than your assumptions, the capital needs to get way bigger fast. Most people treat inflation like a trivia. Late starters can't because inflation doesn't just raise costs. It raises the size of your gap. And a bigger gap multiplies into a bigger capital need over time. So here's the move. You don't pick one inflation assumption. You run a range. Try 3%, try 4%, try 5%. Not because you're trying to predict the future, because you're trying to build a plan that doesn't snap under reality. If you're in a high cost of living area, you already feel this. If you're in a low cost area of living, you're not immune. It just means you get punched later. The point is not fear. The point is honesty. There are only 4 levers. Everything else is just some sort of variation. Spend less, work longer, earn more, higher upside tools only after you stabilize and protect. Now watch how each lever actually changes the math for you. If your gap is $2,700 a month and you shrink your baseline by $500 a month, your gap drops to $2,200 a month. That's $6,000 less a year for your gap. Now that doesn't sound sexy. I get it, but it's massive. That's why stabilize isn't being cheap. It's buying freedom. If you add 2 or 3 years, you add runway, more time to build, fewer years drawing, potentially higher reliable income depending on your system. I'm not telling you here to work longer. I'm telling you to understand the value of time. Late starters don't win because they found the perfect ETF. They win because they created surplus and then protected it. Typically, when people feel behind, they jump to, no, I just need high returns. No, first stability, then protection, then only then you earn the right to explore higher upside tools carefully with sizing, risk controls, and the ability to survive if it goes wrong. Because late starters don't have the luxury of blowups. Quick note, hey, I'm not your financial advisor. This video is purely educational so that you can start thinking clearly about retirement and ask better questions. So as we come to the end of the video, some of you are wondering, well, damn, David, like you explained the case clearly, but I still don't know where to go from here. And that's okay. Subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell, because in the near future, I will not only make available to you my retirement gap calculator so you could avoid the spreadsheets and doing the math yourself, but also open up my calendar so I can speak with you one-on-one and figure it out together. That's the beautiful thing about being a small channel at this moment. I can connect with you guys one-on-one. In the next video, I'm going to walk you through what my wife and I do so that we can stay perfectly aligned with finances. Until the next video.